One of the most important element of quality management system is support. It is clause number 7. Imagine how nicely the standard is progressing. The standard started with the scope of the standard, normative reference, if any other standard is integral part of the standard. Then we talked about terms and definition in clause number 3. Then in clause number 4, we talked about the context of the organization, the purpose, the issues, external issues, internal issues that can affect the organization, stakeholders, their interests, stakeholders' interest. We talked about the scope and the processes. Then we talked about leadership. Clause number 5 is leadership. Now, because the context in organization will be managed by the leadership. So logically, after the purpose of the organization is determined, which is clause number 4, which is context, naturally next should be leadership. So clause number 5 is leadership. All leadership related, top management related elements, setting up the policies, setting the organization's direction towards achieving higher objectives, those kind of things, creating a customer focused organization, making sure roles and responsibilities are defined. After that, naturally, you have to do planning. Without planning, you do not achieve any results. So in planning, we talked about risks and opportunities, quality management system planning, how you are designing your system and so on. Once you have planned, now you have to start mobilizing resources. So support is naturally going to be the next element, which is clause number 7. In support, we talk about infrastructure, building, competence, documented information, measuring and monitoring resources and all that. So fundamentally important. Without proper resources, you never achieve your objectives, because without machineries and equipment, without building workspace, how you can achieve your product and services. This training, I'm recording this video. We have softwares, good quality computer, video, audio system, and all those kind of things, and recording media. If we don't have this, we are using a software called Filmora. And this is one of the most state-of-art software for creating videos. And we are trying to utilize those softwares for creating the videos, for making sure it reaches to our learners. So support is extremely important. For that, we need to have infrastructure, which is internet, high-speed internet connectivities and so on, because these are stored in cloud. So we need high-speed internet connectivity. They will be connected to our YouTube videos. So you need to have good speed. Otherwise, the recording quality will not be acceptable. And the video illumination level, the sound clarity level, and the picture quality level will not be of acceptable standard. So these are all infrastructure that we need even for these training provisions. For online training, we need high quality audio video system, high quality learning management system platform. So we have got our own master study LMS, which we are using, where you have got all the learning resources being introduced. We are using Microsoft Team or Zoom Corporate for offering the training, which can create almost a near simulated situation where almost we are sitting next to each other. All right. So you can share your comments, you can share your screen, we can share our screen, you can give a presentation, you can listen in real time, you may be continents away, but still you are on the same page. You are available together on the same computer screen, you can see each other, their body language, their reactions, their interactions, you can criticize, you can review their performance, you can comment on their presentations in real time, wherever they're in the world. And this is one of the state-of-art infrastructure. So all infrastructures are included in clause number 7. Let us see what the standard talks about the support. First of all, it is resources. Resources will be different types of resource. We'll talk about resource more in detail. Then comes competence. Competence is ability of the persons to deliver results, to perform that task. So competence is a combination of knowledge and experience. So what we seek is, are the people competent to perform their task? And then we have got awareness. Are the people aware of their roles and responsibilities? Then come communication. Then comes communication. Communication is interacting with people, sharing informations, getting informations back and forth from them. You share some information, you get feedback from them. And this is part of communication. So communication is exchange of meaningful data and information. And then you need documented information. Without documented information, you cannot effectively implement a management system. Quality management system is a documented process. There are a certain amount of documentations needed, and all those documented informations need to be controlled. So control of documented information is clause number 7.5. This makes support. So with more in detail, we'll talk about resources. In support general, top management shall support the quality management system and engagement of people that enables provision of adequate human and other resources. So it is the top management must provide the adequate human and other resources. Other resources would include machinery, infrastructure, transportation, information technology, logistics, infrastructure, internet, for example, all those kind of things. We have got online video conferencing software and so on. So these are kind of infrastructure that is needed. For monitoring processes and results also, support is needed. Determining and evaluating the risks and opportunities. So you need to provide resources to evaluate risks and also evaluating opportunities. We have got a lot of videos on risks and opportunities. Implementation of appropriate actions. So actions that is needed for quality management system must be implemented. So infrastructure is this flyovers that is coming up. You can see how robust infrastructure is being built. Without this, you cannot develop a nation. I was in China. It's one of the most fascinating countries that I have seen. Beautiful road infrastructure. Basically, you don't stop anywhere. There is no signaling business on highways. You travel at midnight in torrential rain and 120 kilometer speed or 100 kilometer speed non-stop because you don't stop anywhere. The roads are flat and level with great road grip. So you speed very high and therefore China is progressing. I would say that one of the reasons for China's progress is incredible development of infrastructures. For developing an organization, it needs to determine and provide and maintain infrastructure necessary for the operation of its processes and to achieve conformity of products. We have given examples already, and products and services, of course. Infrastructure can include building and associated utilities. All right, it's quite understandable. For exploration of crude oil, you need a gathering center, you need rigs, you need all those kind of drilling support services and utilities. So this is what it is talking about. So building associated utilities, equipment, including hardware and software. Of course, this goes without saying. You can easily understand what it's talking about. It doesn't need any explanation. Then transportation resources. I was auditing a company last week. They are into drilling support service. What an incredible infrastructure they have developed for cementing operation, for coil tubing. They have got the cementing equipment, the cement mixtures, and for the carrying the cement, the infrastructure for testing and validating the cement mix before they are injected to the well and so on. So it's a state of art. It's a feast for eyes to see the kind of infrastructure a company has developed in terms of equipment, hardware, and software. They can actually create a simulation how the cementing operation will be done and how much time it takes to solidify and get the full strength and so on. It should not dry so fast and it should not take so much of time to also settle. Now, what you need is transportation resources. One of the most important thing is transportation resources. For example, for this company, for drilling support service, they've got state-of-art transportation facilities. They can transport the mixed cement to the site in different rig sites with the bulkers, all sort of equipment. Transportation of people, transportation of equipment, rig transportation, rig movement, well companies, drilling support service companies, drilling companies, will have their rigs and so on. So these are all equipment and infrastructure, and they need state of art and safe transportation facilities. Information and communication technology. Information technology, IT, is one of the most important thing that supports an organization's information system. Without IT system, I don't feel any modern organization can sustain and grow. So it's one of the most important element of support. Environment for the operation of processes. Environment means work environment. The environment that is needed for the product realization, that will differ from company to company, organizations to organization, depending on their type of work. For example, you can see in the picture, welding operation is going on. Looks like this is happening on a structure within a factory shed, because you can see the smokes going up gradually. If that was in the field, there'll be a lot of wind drafts, wind blowing. In that case, welding operation cannot happen this way. So you might need windbreaks. Now, in this particular case, you can see there's a huge amount of smoke. I would feel there is a need for an extractor, for fume extractor. So that will make the place more safer and more productive. So that's what is the operation. For proper operation, you need good support and work environment. You need good. For a proper operation, you need fantastic work environment. I was in a fish processing unit. The entire facility needs to be maintained in absolutely hygienic conditions. So access of the people to the place is highly restricted. Everyone is sterilized before they are going there. They are provided the right kind of attire which they are mandatorily going to use. They have got protection for hair so that hair doesn't fall in the food product and gets packaged and goes to the customer. Their mouth is covered. These are the requirement of food industry to have very high level of sanitized condition for their product realization. The place must be clean, so they take swab testing whether microbiological growth are happening. When outsiders are coming, they'll be sterilized to go inside. I went for an audit in a division of a company. They test smell of the product. So the place has to be maintained at a higher pressure so that the wind will flow from the inside to outside, so that outside smell cannot come inside. No one can get access using their perfume. They cannot smoke. They cannot have perfumes and all that, because that can vitiate the environment within. So the higher pressure inside, no fragrance and no odor from outside. So depending on different types of business, you need different type of work environment, and that's what is important. So we'll have to identify. So as an auditor, you would like to see what kind of environment they need for their product. So determine and provide maintain environment necessary for the operation of the processes, achieve conformity to the product and services. Combination of human and physical factors such as social, non-discriminatory, calm and non-confrontational. Imagine the social environment is so important. People are working. Just imagine if there's a racial discrimination, people cannot work comfortably in a place. If the place is noisy and the place is where everybody criticizes each other. So you need a calm and non-confrontational environment, social environment. It's a nice place to be in. It's a productive environment. You feel like going there, and in a place you don't feel, because there's a highly stressed place. People not talk to each other. There are politics. There's a lot of criticism. You're not appreciated. You are discriminated. You don't feel like working there. So these are kind of social factors. There is no gender bias. There is no racial or ethnic, kind of discrimination. These are important factors. Psychological, stress reducing, burnout prevention, emotionally protective. So yeah, if you do a mistake, well, fine, you tried your best. Keep it up. It'll be done again. Why did you do this? You are good for nothing, and that means you lost complete reputation and you are humiliated in front of your colleagues. This is not a place where one can work. So stress reducing, burnout protection, and emotionally protective environment is psychologically fit environment for someone to work. Right? Physical environment, temperature, heat, humidity, right airflow, hygienic condition, noise level. This goes without saying. Temperature, very high temperature very low temperature, high heat, humidity. For example, if an organization is doing painting and coating services, so for them temperature control is very important, heat, but most important is humidity and airflow. If there's a wind blowing, that can bring a lot of sand, a lot of dust, right? So for a painting and coating shop, you need sufficient wind break so that the cross ventilation does not happen. Humidity, very high humidity will leave a layer of possibly moisture on the surface. So after some time, the paint can flake off and corrosion can start. This is how for a painting and coating shop, humidity and airflow is extremely important. If you are in a hospital, imagine the amount of hygienic condition needed in an ICU. Sterilization is so fundamentally important. The tummy of the patient is open, or brain of the patient is open, or an open heart surgery is happening. So just imagine what kind of havoc can happen, what kind of disaster can happen if the environment within the ICU is not well maintained. So this is the importance of hygienic condition, noise level. If you are in a training institution, if you are teaching, now imagine I am recording this video and lot of noise around. Can I do this recording? So during the training, if there are a lot of noise around, you cannot properly do this service. So for every service and every product realization, physical environment is very important. These factors can depend substantially depending on the types of product and services. So you need to identify what is needed. So this is something that you need to identify as an implementer, and as an auditor, you have to see whether they have identified the suitable work environment to make sure these enablers are helping them to realize the product and services that is necessary, that is norm in the industry, and that is essential for a good quality product and services that they are going to offer. Now, monitoring and measuring resources. You can see I love coffee. Sometimes I feel I get up in the morning to have a wonderful sip on a nice coffee that I make for myself. In the mug, you have seen the thermometer, and after the frothing, you need to see the temperature. It should not be above 70 degrees. You will burn your tongue. So its maximum temperature cannot exceed more than 70 degrees centigrade. So this is the temperature you have to make sure. In coffee shop, this is a normal instrument. They use the thermometer, they dip the needle and you measure the temperature, because this is a product given to the customer, then have a sip. If the temperature is abnormally high, they will burn their lip and tongue and curse and never to come back again. So therefore, measuring and monitoring resources. Measuring means you are getting a right value, exact value. Monitoring means measuring the temperature, measuring the status. It could be temperature, it could be pressure, it could be any environmental condition, higher humidity, lower humidity, higher temperature, lower temperature, higher level of fluid, lower level of fluid. For example, in a tank, higher level of crude, high level, low level, things like that. So measurement means finding a true value. Monitoring means finding the status. All right. So this is what is needed. So measurement and monitoring, I have got a video how to audit measurement and monitoring resources. It's one of the most important thing. In fact, there is a standard itself, ISO 17025, which talks about testing and calibration, competence assessment of testing and calibration laboratories. So this instrument needs calibration. And when you perform the test, what is the reliability of the testing process and so on. So what I'm saying is measuring and monitoring resources need to be checked for their fitness for the purpose. So they are calibrated or verified or both. And by doing so, the status of these devices or instruments or resources are identified, whether they are fit for the purpose, they are calibrated and the calibration is within the validity period, and how they are calibrated, how they make sure that they remain under calibration, valid calibration. What if the calibration expires? What if an instrument was out of calibration and used inadvertently and some material has already gone out of the system, might have reached the customer, how things are done? So all those things are discussed in support. So what is required? You identify each instrument, those requires calibration or verification for valid and authentic results. And then you identify whether you are doing it or you will send it to outside. You identify them, specify their needs for accuracy and resolution or whatever is needed to make sure they're fit for your purpose. Get them calibrated, get them verified, either internally or externally. Keep records of such kind of calibration and verification, and keep records of all those things that are used. And even if they're out of calibration and you are forced to use for temporary use under certain conditions with, say, customers consent that there is no other way you have to use it, and we're taking it, but immediately after the inspection you calibrate them until such time we'll hold them. It's like that can happen under certain conditions. So but you need to know the condition and fitness and suitability of those instruments for their purpose. So organization shall ensure that the resources provided are suitable for the specific type of monitoring and measurement activities being undertaken, and are maintained to ensure their continuing fitness for the purpose. Right? And the organization should retain appropriate documented information as evidence of fitness for the purpose of measuring and monitoring resource. This means you have to check the calibration results. And standard require those calibration results are traceable to national or international standard. Let me give a very simple example. This instrument that you see on your screen is calibrated with another instrument. If that is reliable, now this instrument that you are using is reliable. Ultimately, this has to be calibrated with one instrument that has been calibrated with another instrument and another instrument, an unbroken chain to reach that the master device was calibrated, traceable to national or international standard. If I am using this watch, it is 5:45 now. This is calibrated with Kuwait National Time, since I am right now in Kuwait. Now Kuwait Standard Time is calibrated with GMT, which is the international standard. So my watch is calibrated with Kuwait Standard, which is calibrated against international standard. All right. People are the enablers. People are the most important element in any management system. It is the people who makes it. It is not machineries that produces result. Machineries are infrastructure. You need them. But who does what? People makes an organization. It's not the machinery and equipment that makes an organization. So you need right people. So performance of an organization is dependent on its people, their competence, right? And the competencies, the QMS is most effective when employees are competent. Top management to provide opportunities for people to develop necessary competence. For example, I myself was sent for a series of training. I have attended auditor program on laboratory competence assessment. I am auditing this standard. I've been involved in auditing quality management systems. So I was trained in quality management system. Without this training, how do I develop my competence? Therefore, competence building is very important. Where the organization determine how do you audit competence? First of all, you see whether the organization has determined required competence. What is needed? What is needed for a TCB tutor to become a tutor? Or what is needed for TCB certification team to become an auditor or a lead auditor or a technical expert or so on. So required competence, and then you see that persons performing those tasks are competent based on those requirements. If there is no requirement, you don't have a criteria. So you cannot assess their competence. So first of all, what is needed for doing this job and whether the people are competent. So for us to be a lead tutor must be lead auditor. So before approval of lead tutor, we check whether he or she has got equivalent competence to become a lead auditor. Are they leading certification audits or are they leading audits? Do they have those set of competencies that is required for the team leader? And once they lead, they have got currency of their knowledge, then they are eligible. They might have to have many other competence, for example, linguistic proficiencies. They have to have their personal attributes to become an outstanding auditor. They have to have maturity, dexterity, and all those attributes of the auditor. So based on that, our tutors will be approved. So therefore, first of all, you need to identify the competence needed, and those competence are available. Then additional competence is required. How additional competences are obtained? train, hire, or reassign persons, review effectiveness of the actions taken to satisfy the competence needs. Necessary competence has been achieved or not, periodically review the competence of the person. These are some of the things that you have to do. I've got a complete video on competence assessment. I encourage you to have a look at it. Awareness is being familiar with what is needed. For example, you are capable as an auditor, but you don't know how audits are done in this organization. That's awareness. So awareness is attained when people understand their responsibilities and how their actions contribute to the achievement of organization's objectives. So you know that this is what I am supposed to do as an auditor in TCB. And when you are auditing in this organization, these are the kind of forms and formats you have to do. These are the kind of reporting system they have to have. This is the audit protocol they follow and things like that. So each organization has got their own processes. So communication, a very interesting video I've developed on communication. I encourage you to go through that. Communication is actually sharing information, is a transmitting and receiving informations. So communication, planned and effective internal throughout the organization and external with the relevant interested parties. Communication enhances people's engagement and increases understanding of the context of the organization. They will know what kind of risks are coming from outside, what is our purpose of the organization, what results we are supposed to achieve, what kind of external issues are affecting us, what kind of internal issues are affecting us, bothering us, and how we have a grip on that. Needs and expectation of the customers and other related interested parties, relevant interested parties. So a good communication will make sure that you have a thorough understanding and on the QMS processes. Now, communication plan. So stakeholders, maybe customer. So what to report, how frequently to report, who will communicate, and how to communicate, what kind of records of communication will be retained. These are all part of a communication plan. A very interesting point I'm trying to tell you here. Neighbors. A couple of years ago in Yemen, I audited a company. When I have gone for the audit, I heard there was a fire in the tobacco godown, and the people in the surrounding area didn't know where to go, where to run. Because just imagine, tobacco godown is on fire, and what is going to happen to the surrounding areas, you can imagine. So, what to report? So, you need to identify that in case of something happens, you have to have a public address system. They don't know where from the smell is coming. They don't even know what this factory is doing, what is there inside. So it is the organization's need and responsibility to communicate with the customer, and how frequently. Okay, it could be once, it could be given on the outside and the main gate. These kind of hazards, do not move around with cigarette butts and all that, it can catch fire. And all those kind of things. It's very, very serious matter. And then who will be responsible in case of any problem? Who is going to have triggered the communication system, public address system? How you are communicating? Sometimes emergency alarm can be given, the siren can be given. Who is activating that? You need to identify what kind of communications are to be made and when, how frequently will be communicating, what kind of records will be retained. We're going to talk about documented information. You know, documented information means information, those are documented, available in some form. It doesn't have to be written. It could be written, it could be a video, it could be an audio. It is available. It could be in braille system, but it has to be. It could be an electronic document, but it has to be available in some media. So information and the supporting media is documented information. So it has got few elements. One is general requirement for documented information, creating and updating documented information, and control of documented information. You need to control documented information to make sure your documents are developed and created and updated. They are correct, they are accurate, they are authorized and approved by the relevant authority. So they are authentic document. They are the right most appropriate document for reference and use, and they are also controlled. Their distributions are controlled so that people have got access to the latest version or most applicable version of the documented information. Imagine if you don't have the right document to refer, you know everything to be done, you know the fabrication has to be done, how fitter knows that how to prepare this joint, but a wrong drawing or obsolete drawing has not been removed from the place of work. By mistake, he picked it up and started working and already fabricated the piece of item. based on an obsolete drawing only to know that this is complete wastage of time and money and the resource. They have fabricated something which does not meet the customer requirement because an obsolete and wrong drawing was used. So it is very, very important to have a very good control of documented information. Let's see what standard talks about. Documented information general. Organization's quality management system shall include documented information required by ISO 9001 standard. Standard requires certain documented information. So in the standard, we have got a workshop and you are going to have a very interesting case study. What kind of documented information the standard requires mandatorily? Standard requires certain documented information to be maintained, certain documented information to be retained. Retained are for providing evidence that something has been done. Maintained is for reference for various purpose. For example, procedures are maintained, records are retained. So those kind of things. Now, documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for effective quality management system. So something is mandatory that you have to maintain as per the requirement of the standard. But this may not be adequate. Every organization, depending on their priorities, depending on their complexities, can develop their own required documentation that is left to the organization, and those procedures, documented informations are also to be maintained or retained. And this is the kind of structure that you have to have. Extent of documented information can differ from one organization, of course, which will depend on the size and complexity and type of activities, processes, products, and the services offered, and the complexity of the processes, and their interactions, and the competence of the person. Of course, competence of the person will define what kind of procedure may be needed. Let me give an example. In a hospital, which is also a medical college, you need to have a procedure for example, bypass surgery, because the students are learning, medical students are learning how to do bypass surgery. Now, when the student has become a doctor, do you feel he needs to look at the procedure for doing the bypass surgery? In that case, he will say that stop operation and patient will run away because the doctor is looking at the procedure to do the operation. Not going to be comfortable if procedures are used in some cases, and some cases you might need important. So for creating and updating, organization must ensure appropriate identification and description of the documented information. For example, look at our procedure, this presentation. This presentation here is a quality QLF 15 standard interpretation for student. S stands for student. It is revision 2 for advanced preparation. This is the reason I am giving this video. This is not going to be discussed at this detail during the lead auditor course. This is for advanced preparation. And this was approved on 1/6/2018. You might see that there is no signature of approval, not required. You have to go and ask. You have to ask during the audit, is this the latest procedure or is this the latest documented information? I would say yes, or my colleagues will say yes. How do you make sure it is the latest? Well, we have got a master list of document, and in that master list of document which is approved, it shows the chapter 4 QLF 15 standard interpretation for the students, the documented information. The interpretation part, the standard interpretation, is revision number 2. So this is how a document is identified, dated, and reference number is given. Author may be given, author need not be given. In some cases, a book can be identified by the author's name, ISBN number, and whatever way they're identified. Creating and updating. So the standard requires the organization needs to ensure appropriate identification and description of the documentation that I have already explained right now. So the format, language, software, version, graphics, media, paper or electronic. So this is an electronic document. I'm presenting through a PDF document or PowerPoint presentation, which is in electronic media. I can print it out and give it to you, right? Language is in English, software version. When software is used, that is the time you may have to give software versions and stuff like that. The review and approval for suitability and adequacy. So once we are using it, once it is revision 2 and in circulation, this will be considered, this is definitely approved for use. Control of documented information is to make sure that the documented information required by the quality management system standard and those identified by the organization need to be controlled to ensure it is available and suitable for use. So they must be available and they must be suitable and they will be available. They must be available where and when they're needed. Now, just imagine early days when the quality management system and the softwares were not so much common. Email even was not common. I do remember when email came and Hotmail, and we can access email, send mail in 98 towards the time. It was an amazing experience. Before that, there was no email. So we were taking printout of documented information, printout of procedures and all that, physically distribute, take back the old ones. Now we are sending all documents by email and we are keeping all our documented information in cloud. So if you have got access in the password, you can download them from anywhere in the world. And the issuer or the controller are making sure that the latest version is available in the server or in the SharePoint or wherever they're supposed to be available. They're kept. When we did not have that level of sophistication, we created an email address with password shared with everyone. So all our documented information we have just loaded in the draft. So whoever requires to access those documented information can go to that email, download the information, and then they can use if it is needed. So the way it can be done could differ from organizations to organizations, depending on the sophistication and software they're using and the sophistication of IT system they have. But the whole idea is they're available at the point of use. In one company, I'm giving you an example of fantastic shift from a process from distribution of drawing. Earlier, the company used to have PGN boxes. So the drawings are kept in the PGN boxes identified with different user. The user will have a look at it. Oh, this document is for me and they're using. Now everything is going through software and SAP ERP solution, and whoever is the user, they can download it and use it even in the shop floor. So things are available, made available in different ways. It could be in physical distribution, it could be electronically. It is protected. The documented information must be protected from loss of confidentiality, improper use, or loss of integrity. Sometimes, if you see a document got corrupted, PDF document got corrupted, cannot be opened, and this is what you have issued to everyone, then there is a problem. Confidentiality. We are using password protection. So we share the passwords within the organization. So those who are authorized to use the documented information, they have to use the passwords to access those documentation. Without this, they cannot access. So this is how maintain confidentiality. The organization shall address the following: distribution, access, retrieval, and use. How do we control that distribution? How do we ensure access? How do we ensure retrieval? And stuff like that. Storage, preservation, including preservation of legibility. So if some documented informations are kept in a folder and you find that over a period of time it got faded, so the legibility got affected. Or sometimes it happens that a lot of photocopies are kept together. Now they got so badly pressed, now when they're taken, the ink got transferred and then it is not legible any longer. And there is a problem. You can keep an old photograph or old X-ray copy and they're not preserved properly. They got some nail mark or other mark. This is a record. This record is now not readable. A lot of artifacts have developed, making it illegible. Its legibility is affected, and the X-ray film is not good for reference. Control of changes, version controls. I have already shown earlier document that this document that we are using is revision number 2. Retention and disposition. Standard requires you have to define the retention period. Standard does not specify. Some standard specifies requirement. For example, API Q1, which is standard for oil and gas petroleum industries, they specify retention period of the quality records shall be minimum 10 years. It's the requirement of a particular standard. Now, an organization which is following ISO 9000 as well as API monogram license, they have to retain those documented information for 10 years. Now, it's not a requirement of ISO standard. Standard leaves this to the organization. You retain the documented information as long as they remain valuable. For example, a marriage certificate. How long you are going to keep your marriage certificate? As long as you are alive, or maybe beyond. Your educational certificate. How long you are going to retain your educational certificate? As long as you are alive. Then you give it to your daughter or your son, and they're keeping it much after you are gone. And your great grandson can say, well, this my great grandfather was a lead auditor and he was trained by TCB and this is his certificate. Just imagine after third generation, what is the big deal? You can keep all electronic documents now and just keep them in cloud for generations to come. Things like that. The whole idea is they're protected from deterioration or damage. You are keeping them in a secured place so that they don't get damaged or deterioration. Documented information of external origin, underlined, determined by the organization, necessary for planning and operation of quality management system. So there are a lot of documented information, external origin are used. Documented information of external origins are basically documents which they refer are not controlled by them. They're external document. For example, international standards. For example, customers contractual documents, contract copy, for example, customer standard, for example, KOC standard, PDO standard, Shell DPs, ERDs, KNPC standard, WinGC standard, for example, or Chevron standard, things like that. So each organization can have their standard, which can become mandatory for their contractors to use. So if an oil and gas company, if a contracting company has to follow Shell standard, that becomes their mandatory documented information of external origin that they have to maintain. So they have to define and determine those things. An organization, a service station, for example, a car service station, they are doing servicing of a vehicle, for example. So they are servicing vehicles. What is their guideline? The original equipment manufacturer's recommendation. So Ford's recommendation, Toyota's recommendations and stuff like that, GMC's recommendation. They keep the records, they keep the drawings and stuff like that, assembly procedure, maintenance procedure, replacements recommendation, after how many years or hours of use a piece of item has to be replaced. For example, how frequently a spark plug needs to be replaced, stuff like that. These are all documented information of external origin. So organization needs to identify or determine what is required for their operation. And you have to ask. It is not the auditor's prerogative. You have to look at whether they have identified, they have got a process, and how they make sure they are most applicable latest version. Sometimes it could be legal compliance requirement. So environmental regulation, Bharat 2, Bharat 3, these are kind of environmental regulation needed for an automobile manufacturer, for a car manufacturer. So their design, the engine has to comply with those emission regulations. So you need to maintain those regulations. You have to know those regulations and you have to keep track of what is the new regulations in force. It could be environmental regulation of with environmental protection regulation for a company which is operating a oil and gas facility. They are having flare stacks. So what they are throwing to the air, those emission needs to be within the permissible allowance of KEPA regulation, for example. Therefore, an operation of an oil and gas company, for an example, a refinery, this, even though an environmental requirement, that's the requirement of their operation. It is an environmental regulation, but it is required for their normal operations. So even for quality management system, those requirements becomes regulation that they have to compliance obligation. So they have to keep a track of latest KEPA regulation. What is the latest version in force? So this is how the whole things are done. I hope the discussion that we had gave you some information that you needed to know most. Please read the standard once again. Should you have any question, please review this presentation once again, or you can write back to us. I'll be more than happy to be of any support to you. Thank you so much.